how do we control where this appears and how can we do it procedural? So in order to make this procedural, what you need to do is split the line. Yes, so we have our main pattern here, and instead of having the slow blur just here in the middle and just continue with the rest of the details, what we did is we set this here, yes, and we are combining our main pattern with our slow blur, and we are using a mask. And that's how we create this really nice detail around here. But again, this is not the end of it. There's something else coming really soon that makes this a masterpiece. Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are here with our second Discord bootcamp. Yes, unfortunately the full video of the bootcamp was corrupted, so we weren't able to fix it, to upload it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the whole graph, yes, we built in order to create the material during the classes. Unfortunately, you won't be able to see me struggling with some problems and solving them, but you will get a really depth insight on how to create this wood pattern material and the overall roughness and base color as well, which gives this material the most strength of it. So in this case, I wanted to do a material that was more arch piece related, and for that it was going to have really low detail on the surface. In fact, I think this doesn't have any kind of detail in the surface. So the focus on these details were around the edges and the shapes. So of course, for those who don't know, this is called tile sampler. Basically, we use it with these parameters just to make, yes, let's do it again, just to create the wood pattern we were needing. So I'm going to set these same parameters, 14. Yes, I'm going to set these to 2. And you're going to see what happens. We're going to have this amount, yes, by this amount of lines. So we have 2 columns, 14 wood planks, and we can even increase the amount of wood planks. And this happens as well here. If I come here and start adding wood planks, it's going to have the same effect, as you can see. And the material is still gonna tile as it should. So how do we get to that final result? So first we do have this. So we have the same parameters here, same amount of X and Y. What we want to do is offset this by half. Yeah, this is gonna give us the value we want, but we need to do vertical offset. Yeah. Now that we have our vertical offset, we have to increase a little bit this. Let's try 0.9. That looks a little bit better. Let's do 492. Yes, let's try to go slower so we can get really nice shape of what we want to do. And now that we have this distance, what we want to do, yes, is just increase not X but Y. Yes, we want to play a little bit with this. This doesn't clamp only at 1, but you can go even higher, as you can see. So I'm just gonna do, let's do 7 just to, no, looks like 8, it is. So now we have the wood pattern, the same wood pattern. So what I did here, basically, yes, is I tried to change a little the edges, yes, but it's not really visible because I didn't actually make it work. So I'm going to show you the same thing I did on the class. So if you blur a shape, you're going to see that the pixels start to, let's say, expand, and they have different tones. So if we blur this a little bit, like for example this much, and then we use a levels to control this information, you're gonna see that the shape of our wood planks is gonna change. So we went from a really sharp edge, yes, to a really nice corner, round corner, which has a small gradient. And I think the result is gonna be even more visible here. You're gonna see, you see how this edge right now, it's more like spilled a uniform color for you, so actually see the detail and you're not being bothered by anything else. So you see how now, yes, the edge went from something really sharp, yes, like this, to something really round like this. This is really nice, but of course this also makes our wood planks way smaller. Yeah, so we're gonna stay with the other result. Yes, delete this as well, create again the uniform color. I deleted. Here we go. So you can actually see the details. So what I did here was a basic class for edge detailing and actually any kind of detail. So many people, what they usually do is they come here, yes, and they get a slow blur, yes, and they go for a parallel north. Oh no, let's do edge distraction. So most people go for a cloud 2, and they do this. They just plug everything where it should go, Yes, go for a low value like this, and that's their edge detail. And they connect this right onto their main, let's say, node composition. Now, the problem with this is that we don't have actual control of what we are doing. Yes, and we don't have actual control of what they're doing because first, this is way too strong and we don't understand very well what is going on. So I'm gonna show you how to actually create the edge details in these wood planks based on the reference we had at that moment, yes, that actually make a difference. Yeah. So in this case, I wanted to have this kind of micro details, so I use a black and white spots too. Why? The slope blur, what it does, yes, it takes the information inward and outwards in the edge of your shape. So if I increase this, but let's use a Perlin noise in this case. If I increase the intensity of the slope blur, you're seeing that the most of the edges are going inwards, yeah? And that's because we have this on min. If we change this to max, edges are going to start to go outwards. See how they blend? And it's going to depend on the slope input, yes, or slope map you set to your slope blur. So in this case, as I wanted really sharp and small details, I just wait for a black and white spots too, which has these circles and other white spots around. It's more like spots all around it that generate kind of like different variations. I use a high pass grayscale just to reduce the contrast of it. Yes, this is how it actually looks when you are on the going. Yeah, so we're going to reduce the contrast so it's pretty much uniform everywhere. Yeah, the levels to bring some color up, and then the slope blur. But look at this. Many people, when they're working with the slope blur, they just go for 0.1 as their main value and then maybe go 0.05. But in this case, I went super low, 0.0005. So I went really low on the values. And that's because the detail is way too sharp and it should be a detail. It shouldn't be something that is like everywhere, yeah? And it shouldn't be calling that much for attention. It should be a detail that you have some places, but you don't have other places. Which brings us to the second part. How do we control where this appears and how can we do it procedural? So in order to make this procedural, what you need to do is split the line. Yes, so we have our main pattern here, and instead of having the slope blur just here in the middle and just continue with the rest of the details, what we did is we set this here, yes, and we are combining our main pattern with our slope blur and we are using a mask. Now you can use any kind of mask, and depending on the mask you use, it's going to look different the detail, but I really like using this kind, for this kind of details, I really like using maps like Gaussian blur, slope blur, and so Perlin noise and so on, as they give us a better result. I'm gonna leave this like this for the moment. So that was all of it for the wood planks. We're gonna go to this later, and we're not gonna be doing more of it because the focus on this material was not the actual wood planks, but the base color of it and creating wood patterns. So over here, what you have is actually the glue that goes in between the wood planks, yeah? So it goes really, really simple. For this kind of mask, what I use is a threshold, yes? So if you type in here threshold, you're gonna have this. And what threshold actually does, yes, is it creates just a really specific mask of the image you input. So as you can see here, as the distance between wood planks is really short, we already have exactly the same pattern. We don't need anything to change. But if we change this from greater to lower, we are gonna get, yes, the opposite. And it works like an invert node. Yes, and the reason why we're doing this is because let's suppose, yeah, I'm doing this, yes, and I add these kind of details to the edges of my wood planks. So what happens here is that right now you have kind of like a gradient. And if I invert this, that gradient is going to still be in our mask, and we don't want that gradient. We want the overall, yes, mask, exact mask of the space between our wood planks, yeah? So this is the way to get it. Now, why do we want that space specifically? Because we want to be able to actually edit that information in any way we can without having to really worry about that kind of blur. So basically, when I try to do this, I will use a threshold and then a bevel, and from there I start just repeating the same steps I did with the main pattern. Yes, as you can see here, there's a slow blur. I think I even used the same noise but with a different random seed. another mask, yeah. And I didn't really took much time on this one, as you can see, because it was not the whole point of it. And to blend them, I use a high blend, yeah. There's not much to it, that's all of it, actually. Once we finish with our base part of the material, because this material didn't have any other thing like this, it was really a simple material on what it is, the height and surface. That's why you don't see any kind of edge details on top, because it's a treated wood, so it doesn't have that. It has been polished, so you are not going to have that. And you can see the effect is already showing there just by having the roughness. So we were not going to need that kind in here. This is how I build my base color. I know it looks a little bit messy. Let me fix this here, but it does have a lot of sense. So first off, we are doing wood, and if there wouldn't look like wood if we didn't have the right pattern. And in order to make your wood pattern, yes, what I did was make something really simple, because I didn't want to overcomplicate myself with so much details in this case as well. But sometimes something really delicate and simple can allow you for more detail, more quality in your materials. So how does this work? So we're using a gradient dynamic. Yes, we're using the gradient dynamic in order to build this. So we have a gradient one that is being blurred, input into the gradient input, and for the grayscale input we have a parallel noise with a directional blur. Yes, and see that everything goes in directions in order to build this. Now, the parallel noise, what it's doing is generating this kind of details here, yeah? This kind of like, I wouldn't know how to call them right now, but this kind of circles. And if I keep on stretching this with the directional blur, yeah, you can see that it just becomes lines. So we have the parallel noise to make these circles, the directional blur to generate these lines. And the gradient, yes, the gradient is the base to our material where we will be doing let's say the amount of steps for our material. See, so the more we increase the tighten of our gradient linear, the more detail or more lines we're going to have. Now bear in mind the following: the values we are using are really high in this case. Many people go directly to 10 or 1 and they get these results. I was using 148 value, so it is really high. Now for the blur, we really don't want that much of a blur. This is just to not leave this like really sharp shapes. We want it to be more like soft and blended as wood color is on this kind of wood planks. And then we have these parameters that are actually not gonna make a change. The only thing I would suggest is to set this to clamp and set it to vertical. If you set it to horizontal, it's not gonna get any result. If you have this image, then you might as well change this to vertical. So the other thing is that our wood pattern is going in one direction and our wood planks goes in another. So we're gonna use a safe transform, just so we can rotate our wood pattern without breaking the tiling of the material. And it also, yes, in this case, let me plug in the base color once again, allows us to tile this material or tile this pattern really easily. So in this case, it won't be needed, but let's say I want this from our project and my lead artist wants this a little bit like, let's say, smaller in tiling. I can just go do this. Go back here, save transform, change this to random and make it tile. And the pattern is gonna go by hand with the actually tiling of the material. Yeah. So this is the first wood pattern, and then I made another wood pattern, as you can see here. They are different. You see that this has like a little bit more of tiling in here. That's because I wanted to do different things. So let's see what I did here. We're gonna go to this part, but let's get to the basics first of base color. So what I did is I selected, yes, 3 colors, yes, from my gradient to set them as my main colors for all my wood. Yes, that's the first step, because I want to get an overall mood for the color before actually jumping into making all the details. Yes, it's just like when you make a height information map. You just want to have the overall tiling and pattern of your material, and then you go to the details. This is exactly the same thing. On top, we have another gradient that instead of taking the information from our wood pattern, it takes information from our wood planks, and it takes them in different colors in order to generate this map. Yes, so let's take a look at what is going on here and how did we blend it. So first, in here, we're using a flood fill to random color. Yes, and 2 specific nodes that are vector grayscale. So flood fill to random color is a node that comes from the flood fill, of course. So for those who don't know, flood fill is a node that it reads all the shapes inside the input image, and it separates each shape if they are more than 1 pixel away. If this is like less than a pixel away, then you're gonna start to have a mistake like this one. Yeah, and things are not gonna work well, as you can see here. So once you have your flood fill, the only thing you need to do is just get your flood fill to random color, and this is going to generate different colors, yes, for each of your wood planks. Yes, why do we want that information? Because we're going to use our vector warp grayscale. And this, as the name says, this warp, it warps our shapes based in the vector or color information we are inputting. So each wood plank now, it's going to have a different part of our wood grain input into its main color. So we're using that information in order to generate our first color pattern. For the second step, what you could actually be doing is, let's get here our dot node. Here, let's generate it here. For these kinds of maps, like the one we have here, where we have each wood plank has exactly the same as the color one, but in grayscale, many people go directly for this map, for the flood fill, and from here they go to flood fill to random grayscale. Yeah, and that's actually quite good because you could actually use it as well, and it's gonna be as useful. There's actually not much difference between one and each other. But the thing we did was, as we were already using this node, which has different colors and each color has different values, we just transform into grayscale. So we have exactly the same map with less memory occupied, and we're using that to choose a different tone for every kind of wood plank. Then we now use a flood fill to random grayscale because we want this to be different from this, to generate another mask to set which of these wood planks is going to be darker and which one is not, as you can see here. So from here, things starts to get a little more interesting, as you can see. And this starts basically with two really specific parts. First, we're getting the vector warp grayscale of our first wood grain over here, and we're multiplying by the information, yes, of grayscale conversion here. So each of these wood grains has the same, let's say, intensity as the wood planks here. And we are taking this to another level, yes. So this level is actually just us trying to get a little more of shape into our base color. Again, what you can do with this is, once you have this input, just go to gradient map, gradient editor, pick gradient, and you pick this from any image you have. Yeah, just like I did, you can do this with your PureRef in here. It works anyways. So what happens if we just plug in this with Hello Mask? Our material is going to be the same everywhere. So once again, we need to use masks. We need to do some masking. And I wanted to use a directional mask like this one, for example, that is Crunch Map 05, as it has the same direction as my wood planks, and it would make more sense. If this was the other way around, let's say, let's rotate this 90 degrees, you see that now it doesn't have much sense. So I wanted to have something with the same direction, yes, and a little bit more flow. Then I use a directional warp with a directional noise just to add that nice wood grain we have here. Yes, that is very noticeable from here, but in these parts it is. And once again, a vector warp to break the tiling of our branch map. Finally, I multiply that with, again, the same information from here because we want to maintain the tones, and we connect that into our mask, and we have this. I wanted to make a version where some of the paint or wood on the wood started to like a little bit wear out because of people just walking through it, over it. It turned out a little better than expected, but the real secret comes later. I'm going to show you where. So once we have this detail, yes, you can see here everything, we go to the next step, which really shows the power of masking. Look how much detail, look the detail we have here, look the detail we have here. Like the change is really different. And we're using just one color. With one color, we managed to change this. But what did we do? We generate a really good mask. That's it. So we use the same, let's say the same wood pattern again, and we process it in different ways. So I wanted something to get this line and add information to this line so it has more depth on the material. Yes, if you check this, these lines are the lines that, not the ones that are whiter, let's say, the ones that are darker. So I wanted to add more contrast to your color. So for this, I multiplied this information, yes, with our directional noise. So now not only it has depth, but it has like a texture, a grain, a detail on it. We use our levels to upscale that, and you can see that we still have the gradient, which is what gives this material, I think, its main capacity, or not capacity, but charm. And once again, we are using another wood detail generator here just to make sure that this is not the same everywhere. So once again, I choose a noise that it has the same direction as my wood planks. And what I did here is, what you can do is you can go for branch map, which is CO2, and you have the brush pattern. So you can lower this, and if you plug this into a tile generator, what happens is that you don't have anymore, yes, those edges that make the image tile. So let me show you. So you go to your tile generator, you go to the bottom of it, and you change the blending mode to max. Yes, and if you start to scale this, you're gonna see that here you have the lines. But if I start doing this, you're gonna see that they start to disappear. Now the only thing you need to do right now is keep scaling, scale random. You go for position random, rotation random, luminance random, and if the image looks like this, what you just have to do is scale this. Now if this looks too strong, what you can do is go here and lower a little bit the balance, and you have another noise. Now in order to make the one I did, I just used two different, yes, you can see here, one with lower balance than the other one. I copied them, yes, I used a copy and sort it by half, so I could have both of them with a lower intensity, and then blend them together to create this kind of pattern, which was then multiplied to our main grain we were working on before. And that's how we create this really nice detail around here. But again, this is not the end of it. There's something else at the end, or let's say coming really soon, that makes this a masterpiece, and you can see it right now. Look at the change, it goes from this node to this node, and that's only because we are taking the edges of all our shapes and highlighting them. This is something you can do, guys. You just go and generate, you take the normal map for your base color of any shape you want, and you take the curvature. The curvature is going to take this information. Look how sharp those edges are. They're really nice. So you turn this information to a gradient map, and you input it to your base color, and you set it to overlay. Look at the difference on the material. Yes, look at what it does to your material. It highlights your edges. So try to use a really soft value, because this is quite strong, as you can see, and because later we are going to do exactly the same here. Yes, we are doing exactly the same, but for our wood planks overall, not to our wood pattern, to add a little bit more highlight to our edges. Basically, here we added the color for our glue, and finally just the sharpen. And let me show you what difference does the sharpen to your material. Yeah, so I'm gonna look for another HDR. I'm gonna look for Tomoko, gonna set it there. This is how our material is looking right now. Yes, looking nice and soft, but once I put my sharpening, it really makes a change. Yeah, see how everything is more like detail right now? It's more sharpened, as the name says. If you have this at 1, you're gonna see that it's gonna be even more intense. But we want this at 0.5 because this is not as destroyed, or let's say as rare as we want to. This is how you actually create a base color. This might not be the exact case you may need for it, but it is how things work in Substance Designer. You generate a detail and you use it to mask other details to build something new, as we did here. For example, we are just using one color, but we generated a whole new pattern using one pattern we built before, yes, blended with other noises, and we generated a really unique detail. And without this detail, our material wouldn't be the same. It would be more boring. This one adds a little more complexity to it and more fun as well. Now, if you don't like most of it and you want to change some of these colors, what you can do is basically add an HSL later. You can change the saturation, just feels too much. You can change the lightness as well. I don't recommend it doing it this way right now. I'd rather have you go directly to making your base color by hand. So we're gonna go for roughness, which is the final step for our material. Now, roughness is a little bit more easier because I get this from Stone Brown. He's an amazing material artist. You can look for him on ArtStation right now. And he gave me some advice, and when I saw his graphs on how to make different materials, I realized that he took information from his base color and converted to grayscale. Yes, and we're using a dot node to take this to our roughness. So I used a histogram gauge to lower the value, as you can see, because our material was more, let's say, shiny. You can see how it was before. It's not really that interesting right now, but if I add this, it looks more interesting. There's more contrast in our roughness, and that's what also the reference had. And I built different details on top of it just to show a little bit more of, let's say, variation on our roughness. So this is another technique I use, pretty similar to the one we saw just right now over here, but this is a little bit different. So not every map you have, every branch map you have, has that kind of parameter where you can just soften these edges so it doesn't tile. For example, this one, if you go here and go for scratch, you're gonna see that you have the scratch metal. If you import this resource, it's gonna take a little bit to load, but you're gonna have it. Now this is not exactly the same, but if you turn this to grayscale information, you already have something to use. Now, in order to make it use, what I did here was I got a shape node, lowered the scale so I have this part only. I blur it and I multiply it. So now I have this, and I have full control of this. I can really lower this or upscale this, and I'm gonna take more or less information. Now, as I didn't want to use another map, and again I wanted to use two maps, I just use the levels to add more contrast and pull some values up on the grayscale, and use again the tile generators and the levels to get a more detailed version of this. Yes, and you can see the difference between this and the other is gonna be terrific. Yeah, this is what makes the difference in a good material and one that doesn't get to the quality we need. So, as you can see here, I'm working with this. Yes, and I'm adding extra information. Yes, I'm trying to add a small variation in my roughness. This is from main base color noise. So this is the main noise we generate for our base color, maybe. Yeah, this one. Just to add variation, we're using the same one to add roughness variation in here. It's really soft, as you can see, because we didn't want to go so hard, but it's just so that the matching, so it matched the color of the part that is wear out with the roughness itself. Same happens here with the scratches. Now the scratches on this way, they're not so deep or strong, yes, to break the wood, but they are really strong as to take away the polish they've done to the wood as well. Yes, you can really see it there, and it adds detail to it, to this. Now here I did exactly the same with this one, with the ground scratches fine, just to generate more scratches that are smaller, and finally add them to my roughness. So if I'm using really dark information and I want to make contrast, I just need to add the information, meaning to add both values, and I'm gonna get these kind of lines. Finally, I added the glue. So this is how I created my wood pattern for our last bootcamp. Now, if you want to make this material even look better, I suggest you that you make a render in Unreal Engine, or as I did in Marmoset 2.4. If you want to see how I make renders for these materials, I suggest that you join us in our next bootcamp class that is going to be this Friday. Now, you can go to the description of this video. There's going to be a link on it, click on it, and fill the form to save your seat. But if you're not able to save a seat on time, don't worry. I'm going to be streaming on YouTube the class as well. So if maybe you're not that interested in participating on the class, but just looking at it but while working, then you can do it as well. I hope you're good, and I'll see you next week.